السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد، يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. My brothers and sisters in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us in this verse, O you who have believed, have the taqwa of Allah, which is the consciousness, the awareness and the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as is rightfully due to Allah, and do not die except as Muslims. To proceed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a verse in which He consoles the believers about their problems when they face them. And this verse is important for us to understand. Why? Because it, of course, part of human nature is that each and every one of us goes through tests and trials and tribulations in this life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَا أَصَابَ مِن مُصِيبَةٍ مَا أَصَابَ مِن مُصِيبَةٍ. There is no calamity that afflicts any of you إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مِّن قَبْلِ أَن نَبْرَأَهَا. Says, none of these calamities, none of this happens except that it is in a book. And of course, he says where? He says, مَا أَصَابَ مِن مُصِيبَةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ. In the earth, or even in yourselves. Which means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that we will have calamities that will happen ourselves. We will go through times of sickness, death will happen, we will lose lives, we will be afflicted with certain ailments and diseases and all of these different types of things, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of this. Not only this, but He's saying, we already wrote this down in a book, مِن قَبْلِ أَن نَبْرَأَهَا, before we even created it. Which means before we created the heavens and the earth, and before we created you. And the Prophet ﷺ says in the authentic hadith, he says that Allah already wrote down everything. كَتَبَ الْمَقَادِيرِ قَبْلَ خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ الْأَرْضِ بِخَمْسِينَ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ. By 50,000 years. Before He created the heavens and the earth, everything was written already. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clarifies even further. He says, إِنَّ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِيرٌ. Indeed, this is very easy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do. It's very easy. For us, this is unimaginable. We can't even fathom what kind of detail there is of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written. We can't even fathom how this is even possible. Of course, on a human level, it's impossible. There's no way for us to fully comprehend this idea. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us this not to confuse us, but to console us. And this is why the next verse is equally important, where He says, لِكَيْ لَا تَأْسَوْا عَلَى مَا فَاتَكُمْ وَلَا تَفْرَحُوا بِمَا آتَاكُمْ وَاللَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ كُلَّ مُخْتَالٍ فَخُورٍ. لِكَيْ لَا تَأْسَوْا عَلَى مَا فَاتَكُمْ, in order for you to not feel any regret over that which does not happen to you. How many times do we feel regret over something that we missed? Oh, I missed this business deal. Oh, I missed the opportunity to get married. Oh, I missed this person. Maybe we couldn't get married to this such and such person or whatever. Or maybe I missed this, or maybe I missed that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, all of this, the idea that everything is written and everything is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is meant so that you don't feel remiss about anything that you do in fact miss. Khalas, this is already written. وَلَا تَفْرَحُوا بِمَا آتَاكُمْ, and do not feel happy over that which Allah gave you. And this is equally important, because a lot of people think mistakenly that what Allah has given them is in fact because of themselves, where in fact it is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is the one who gave it to you. And He says, do not feel happy over that which He gave you. If Allah gave you something, understand that it's a test. And if Allah took away something, understand that it's also a test. A lot of times we understand poverty as being a test, but we do not understand wealth as being a test. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might give somebody for wisdom that only Allah knows. We have no idea what that wisdom is. It's a test to see what you are going to do. And in fact, we have stories of the people before us, many of the nations before us, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested them through various means. But then when they forgot everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught them, فَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ أَبْوَابَ كُلِّ شَيْء. Allah says in the Quran, we open upon them the doors of everything. Meaning Allah gave them so much, it's like an open door, it's just coming at them. Why? Our Prophet ﷺ, he says, istidraja. It's istidraj. Istidraj is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will continue to give in order for them to continue in their bad ways, to see if they are going to stop themselves. Because once Allah stops it from His side, then of course this is always a reminder to us, wait, the good times are over, or maybe I need to review myself. Maybe I need to actually check myself and think about what it is that I'm doing. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps that good, the good of course here being more wealth, but it's not good for them because its repercussions are that they are missing the test. They're not giving for the sake of Allah, for example. They're not paying their due zakah. They are not worshipping Allah as is rightfully supposed to be worshipped. They are not giving to the poor and the needy. They're not helping and assisting one another, etc., etc. They're committing all these sins. They're committing shirk. All of these things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions. فَفَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ أَبْوَابَ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. And then He says, until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has that appointed time, فَأَخَذْنَاهُمْ بَغْتَةً. We take them all of a sudden. Meaning, one day and night, everything is done. Everything is finished. What they had before is completely gone. This is why, ultimately, for the believer, we have to believe, and this is part of our belief, that everything is a test. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he says about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, إِذَا أَحَبَّ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا ابْتَلَاهُ. If Allah loves a servant of His, He will test him. He will send upon him tests. And these tests, by the way, could be in the plus or the minus. Sometimes we are afflicted with a calamity and we don't fully understand what's going on and we feel bad in the moment. We feel sad that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can replace us with something much better. This is why, inshallah ta'ala, the intent of this khutbah is not to just talk about these problems, but what is our response. Imagine now at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he's going through the persecution that he's going through in Mecca, and the torture, and the boycott, and the low amount of food that they had to endure, to the extent that one of the Sahaba, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, he says that when we were in Sham, Abi Talib, this is the little mountain valley that they had, just a little tiny place where khalas, the boycott was, all the Muslims had to go to that one area, and he said we suffered so much hunger that sometimes the only thing that we could find was leaves that we had to boil and eat. This is it. And then he says sometimes the leaves would be finished and we would have to go. And he says one time, he's saying this happened to him personally. He says, I was out in the desert and I was urinating. A'azzakumullah. But he's saying this story. He is urinating. And as he's urinating, he can hear a sound under the sand. And so he stops. Because he's like, it might be something of importance. And he goes and he looks at it and it's a piece of dead animal or dead skin. He doesn't know what it is. But because he hasn't eaten in days, he said, even though I urinated on it, I took it and I washed it and I boiled it and I ate it. This is the persecution that the Muslims had to face, those early Muslims, that we are forever indebted to. Of course, the same person, when he passed away, radiyallahu anhu wa ardah, and because of how they divorced the dunya, meaning they didn't pursue the dunya for the sake of the dunya, they pursued it in order to purchase with the dunya that they have the akhirah. He became one of the generals in the army of the Muslims because he was a good soldier. He was the first Muslim to ever throw an arrow for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he was leading the conquest of Persia. And when the Persian Empire was conquered at his hands and many of the other Sahaba, he himself got so much that he died basically a multi-millionaire. Yet he never indulged in the dunya for one day. He didn't do it for the sake of the dunya. When they left the dunya came running to them. And this is the beautiful thing that happens to the believer. This is why those same companions, what they had to endure, and then look at how everything changed. The same thing happened. The Prophet ﷺ is told, you have to leave Mecca and now go to Medina. A person, if he's told, you have to leave behind your house, all of your wealth, all of your furniture, your clothes even. The only thing that you can take with you is whatever you can carry in order to make the journey quickly so that nobody chases you from Mecca to Medina. A lot of us would scoff at this idea. What are you talking about? No, I can't do this. Yet for the Sahaba it was a test of Iman. Can you leave your house for the sake of Allah? We say Alhamdulillah that we are not tested in this way. Wallahi, Alhamdulillah that we are not tested in this way. You have to leave your house and your wealth and your property and everything for the sake of Allah. A lot of people, even at that time, they said, no, I'm not going to do this. My religion is not worth this. And those people were not labeled as Muslims. The people who did make hijrah, those were the believers. And the people who did not make hijrah, even if they professed outwardly, they did not obey the Prophet ﷺ, they were not believers. What happened though? Even though in the immediate we think that it's very bad. Wait, I have to leave all of this? It is very bad. It looks bad. What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open up for the believers once they were in Medina? Within 10 years, less than 10 years, within 8 years. 8 years, which is very short in the human scale. They went from being a persecuted, tiny group that had to suffer the hunger that Sa'd describes, and now they are the capital of an empire that eventually conquered both the Roman and the Persian empires and became the largest empire that the earth has ever seen at the time. During the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, Medina became the capital of the entire Arabian Peninsula, which hadn't happened in human history. And look at how much wealth was coming to them. This is why the Prophet ﷺ, during the night, in one of the incidents that's mentioned in the Sunnah, wealth came from Bahrain. Wealth came from Bahrain. Bahrain, of course, was the area in eastern Arabian Peninsula. And the wealth came overnight, and people heard that the wealth is coming and that the Prophet is going to distribute it. So he prays Fajr, and after Fajr what happens? He looks, and the masjid is full as it is on Jum'ah. Why? Because a lot of people now came knowing that there's going to be wealth that's going to be distributed. So for money, a lot of people will wake up early. And unfortunately, this is the case even nowadays. For money, people wake up early. But for Fajr, Allahu Musta'an. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us. For money, even to save money, what happens on Black Friday? People wake up and they stay up all night to save how much? $50, $100 on something that they're going to buy. And they're willing to stay up all night to save $100. How much do you gain by just waking up for Fajr? I'm not saying you have to stay up all night. Just wake up for Fajr. Or even wake up and pray 2 rak'ahs or 4 rak'ahs or 6 rak'ahs at night while everybody else is sleeping. How much do you actually gain? And look at that peace and serenity and sakina that Allah gives you, which is what you wanted in that thing that you purchased anyways. Most of the people who indulge in the commercial side of society and materialism and all these things, they buy those things thinking that those things will give them the happiness, not knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give it to you for free if you just stand in front of Him just for a little bit and raise your hands and make dua to Him, or read His book, or contemplate the realities of life. Wallahi, the things that we pursue are actually available to us for free. We don't have to stay up all night in line outside in front of Best Buy to do this. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us. Salama radiallahu anha, she mentions how she dealt with the calamity that happened in her life. Salama, of course, one of the great Sahaba, one of the great companions. She's a righteous woman. And she says that I heard the Prophet ﷺ say, مَا مِن مُسْلِمٍ يُصَابُ بِمُصِيبَةٍ. There's no Muslim who is afflicted with a calamity during this calamity obviously has to have patience. فَيَقُولُ, but he says the following statement. Now when the Prophet says that the person says this, it's not an empty word that he says, not fully understanding what it means. In fact, he fully understands what it means. فَيَقُولُ إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ اللهم أجرني في مصيبتي واخلفني خيرا منها. This is the hadith. So she says, the Prophet says, you say the following, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. To Allah we belong and to Him we will return. They didn't say this emptily. They knew that this means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala owns me and everything that I am and everything that I myself own. He created me after I was nothing, and then tomorrow when I am dust, He still owns me, Azza wa Jal. And to Him we will all return. This is a fact. We cannot deny this. We cannot run away from it. So when a person says this, they fully understand. But he's saying after a calamity happens to them, they say this. After the calamity, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And then they say, Allahumma ajirni fi musibati wa khlufni khayran minha. Oh Allah, give me reward for this musibah of mine, for the calamity. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that there are calamities. Even though Allah created them, and Allah does not want us to feel ultimate sadness, but He does know that things are difficult on us. This is why even the Prophet ﷺ, when he had to endure the test of his own son, a baby, at 1.5 years, imagine 1.5 years, you spent 1.5 years with him. He's not a brand newborn, but he's not older as well, 1.5 years old. And the Prophet ﷺ had to endure the baby going through a fever and a sickness, and then eventually the baby passed away, Ibrahim. And he buries the baby, and the Prophet ﷺ, after he's burying him, he sheds tears. And many of the Sahaba said, Ya Rasulullah, you said not to be sadness, not to experience sadness. He says, this is a rahmah, this is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This type of sadness is completely fine. A Muslim experiencing sadness is completely fine. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had an entire year during his time in Mecca that was called Amul Huzn, the year of sadness. Why was it called the year of sadness? The Prophet was sad. His uncle Abu Talib died, who was basically a father figure. He's basically the one who raised him and sheltered him and gave him protection and helped him, etc. And during that same year, his wife Khadija radiallahu anha passed away as well. And Khadija, we know how much the Prophet loved Khadija. He experienced sadness. In fact, he experienced so much sadness that he did not get married until after the Hijrah, because he was so sad about the loss of Khadija. Now, does that sadness mean that he ever doubted Allah or Allah's mercy or Allah's help for him? No, he never did. There's a difference, my brothers and sisters, between experiencing emotional feelings and between your spiritual status. The Prophet's spirituality never wavered. His belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never wavered. Yet it is okay to experience his sadness, because obviously the Prophet got out of it. He never doubted Allah's help. This is why even when his son Ibrahim passed away, he experienced that sadness, but he moved on. And he understands that this is the sunnah of Allah, this is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everybody will experience tests like these. Going back to Salama radiallahu anha, she says when the person says this, the Prophet says, إِلَّا أَبْدَلَهُ اللَّهُ خَيْرًا مِنْهُ. Except, now if he says this at the calamity, meaning when the calamity hits, you say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Oh Allah, grant me reward for this musibah and grant me better than it. Reward me, meaning in the hereafter, and grant me better in the dunya. Then she says, and I started to think, فَقُلْتُ مَنْ خَيْرٌ مِنْ أَبِي سَلَمَةٍ. So she says this when? after Abu Salama, her husband passed away, radiallahu anhu. Abu Salama was a great Sahabi, a friend of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They migrated to Abyssinia, came back. She had children from Abu Salama. Abu Salama was an amazing man. She loved him so much that after she says this, he passed away, she cried, she felt sadness. But after her husband passed away, she said this dua, and then she thought to herself, who is better than Abu Salama? There can't possibly, she's thinking, she's not doubting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or that He will reward her, but she's now thinking, who is the man that Allah is going to send me, or what is the situation that Allah is going to send me that's going to be better than Abu Salama? I don't know. She couldn't imagine it. But she never wavered in her trust of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He does have a solution for her. This is where the believer comes in and your belief comes in. We never waver in our belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always has a solution for us, sooner or later, whatever it is. Sometimes it is later. For the Prophet ﷺ, after Khadija passed away, he didn't get remarried. It took him a few years to get remarried. Sometimes it will be a few years out. Salama though, as soon as her iddah was over, as soon as her waiting period was over, the Prophet ﷺ comes and knocks on her door. And the Prophet ﷺ talks to her. And he proposes to her. And she says, I realize now who is better than Abu Salama. Not to diminish Abu Salama's place. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, I will always honor and respect Abu Salama. He was my friend. But he wanted to marry her. And because of this marriage, Salama was now elevated from just being a regular companion to now being one of the mothers of the believers. And she is our mother now. This is why we have the ultimate respect for her. But this shows us that how the calamity, even at the moment, it seems very difficult. But the way that we handle it, and the way that we look at it, and the way that we interact with it, will cause that calamity to actually, inshallah ta'ala, be a stepping stone for something better. Just like the hijrah was, just like the death of Abu Salama, etc. All of these, inshallah ta'ala, can be stepping stones to something better. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us and to guide our hearts. قُلُ قَوْلِ هَذَا وَأَسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهَ لِي وَلَكُمْ فَاسْتَغْفِرُوهُ إِنَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. My brothers and sisters in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we have good patience in anything that happens to us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always has a beautiful reward. And we will mention inshallah ta'ala a few ahadith about this. But before we begin, can we ask the brothers inshallah ta'ala to come forward and to fill in the room here on the right side inshallah ta'ala, because there's not enough room in the back. If you can do this, or if you can go even to the right side inshallah ta'ala, if you're in the back, make your way to the right, and inshallah ta'ala make room for your brothers. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَكُمْ تَفَسَّحُوا فِي الْمَجَالِسِ فَافْسَحُوا يَفْسَحِ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. When it is said to you, this is a verse in the Quran, when it is said to you, make room for your brothers, make room for your brothers, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make room for you. Where? Obviously, because it's not mentioned in the Quran, the understanding is that when you make room for your brother, Allah will make room for you in Jannah, inshallah ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants us all Jannah. Patience is very important, and perhaps it deserves not even one, but multiple khutbahs about it by itself. But there is one hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that we will mention, in which he says, مَا يُصِيبُ الْمُسْلِمِ ما يصيب المؤمن من نصب ولا وصب ولا هم ولا حزن ولا أذى ولا غم حتى الشوكة يشاكها إلا كفر الله بها خطاياه. That the believer will not be afflicted with any type of tiredness, any worry, any sadness, even a thorn that he is pricked with, or any type of sickness. Even a thorn that he's pricked with, and it just pricks him a little bit like this, except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expiate some of his sins because of this. Expiation means it's completely gone. Without you even asking for the forgiveness, it's gone. Why? Because you're a believer and you understand that this is part of the test. Such a beautiful hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. And then he says in another hadith, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ فَإِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ. It is amazing the affair of the believer, because indeed all of his affairs is good. Whatever happens to him, inshallah ta'ala, it is good. If something good happens to him, he is thankful and it is good for him. And if something bad happens to him, then of course he has patience and it is good for him as well, inshaAllah ta'ala. This is why if we look, everything that happens to us, we are in between three stages. Somebody is given something good and they are thankful. Somebody is tested and they have patience. And somebody commits a sin, but then he asks for forgiveness. And if the person does these three, then inshallah ta'ala that believer is a successful person. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He helps us and guides us through any type of difficulty that we may go upon, inshaAllah ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He lessens the tests that we have to face, that He makes us among those who are able to pass the tests. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants us patience, that He grants us forgiveness, that He grants us the ability to face all of our tests, inshaAllah ta'ala, with the belief that ultimately these are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no matter what the test is. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us our sins and our shortcomings and that of our forefathers, and to forgive all of the Muslims, inshaAllah ta'ala. Last, before we end, inshaAllah ta'ala, I wanted to encourage everybody to please give generously to the masjid. Our funds are really low. I was surprised actually at how low they are, and I was surprised that, of course I'm new here in the community, but I was told that the community is very generous, and inshaAllah ta'ala I will not be proven wrong in this assumption that the community is in fact very generous. These masajid, all of them around the country, and I've been working at multiple masajid, are all supported locally. We do not rely on foreign donations or a government to fund it or anything like this. If the local community doesn't support it, then it can't be supported. And unfortunately, because of that, people have to move on, or we have to downscale. If we have good ideas, then we can implement them. But if we don't have the support, then we can't implement these ideas either, and we can't support an institution or a masjid or a center like this to be able to do the programs that we want to do. So please give generously, inshaAllah ta'ala. Barakallahu feekum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward everybody for everything that they do. Ibadallah, inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barak ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. كما صليت وسلمت وباركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وأذل الشرك والمشركين أعداءك أعداء الدين. ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. اللهم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا دينا إلا قضيته ولا حاجة من حوائج الدنيا والآخرة إلا قضيتها ويسرتها برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات المؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات يا قاضي الحاجات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات يا رب العالمين. اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. عباد الله، إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله يذكركم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. وأقم الصلاة.